The stars looked different from this part of the galaxy. June pressed his hand against the viewport of his small research vessel and watched as unfamiliar constellations drifted past. He had been traveling for 3 months, collecting data on cultural practices across different species for the Human Anthropological Institute. "Warning. Entering restricted space," announced the ship's computer in its flat, emotionless voice. "Recommend immediate course correction." June frowned and checked his navigation charts. According to his maps, he was still in neutral territory, at least 2 light days from the border of the Hyoran Empire. He tapped the screen, bringing up the detailed star charts. "Computer, confirm location," he said. "Location confirmed. We have crossed into Hyoran space. Border markers have been updated since last chart download." June felt his heart rate increase. The Hyoran were known throughout the galaxy for their strict isolation policies and harsh treatment of trespassers. They were an ancient species with bodies made partially of crystal structures, and they considered themselves superior to most organic life forms. Humans, being relatively new to interstellar travel, were particularly unwelcome in their territory. "Turn around," June ordered. "Maximum safe speed." The ship began to turn, engines humming as they powered up for the retreat. But it was too late. 3 sleek vessels appeared seemingly from nowhere, their crystal-hulled ships catching and reflecting starlight in dazzling patterns. They were Hyoran patrol ships, and they quickly surrounded June's small vessel. "Unidentified ship," came a cold voice over the communication system. "You have entered protected Hyoran space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." June considered his options. Running would only make him look guilty, and his small research vessel couldn't outrun Hyoran patrol ships anyway. Fighting was not an option. His ship had no weapons, and he was a researcher, not a soldier. "This is June Kim of Earth," he responded. "I'm a cultural anthropologist on a research mission. My crossing your border was an accident. My charts show this as neutral space." There was a long pause before the reply came. "Your ignorance of our territory is not an excuse, human. Prepare for boarding." Within minutes, 6 Hyoran soldiers entered his ship. They were tall beings with humanoid shapes, but skin that appeared to be made of smooth, living crystal. They moved with perfect precision, their bodies catching the light and breaking it into rainbows. Despite their beauty, there was nothing warm or welcoming about them. "June Kim of Earth," said the leader, her voice like glass chimes in a cold wind. "You are under arrest for trespassing in sacred Hyoran space. Additionally, we detect cultural artifacts in your possession. This constitutes attempted theft of knowledge." "Those are just recordings and notes," June protested. "I'm a researcher, studying cultural exchange between species. Everything I have was freely given by the cultures I visited." The Hyoran officer ignored his explanation. "You will be taken to Hyoran Prime to face judgment." They placed crystal cuffs on his wrists. The cuffs adjusted to his size, tightening until they were snug against his skin. Though they looked delicate, June knew they were stronger than steel and would track his movements and vital signs. The journey to Hyoran Prime took 3 days. June was kept in a small holding cell aboard the patrol ship. They gave him food and water suitable for humans, but no information about what would happen to him. He spent the time reviewing what little he knew about Hyoran culture, hoping to find something that might help his case. On the 3rd day, the ship entered orbit around Hyoran Prime. Through a small window in his cell, June could see the planet. Below, it was breathtaking. A world of crystal cities that caught the light of its sun and broke it into millions of colors. Floating structures hung in the sky, connected by bridges of light. Under different circumstances, he would have been thrilled to study such a place. The guards came for him as the ship docked with a floating platform high in the planet's atmosphere. "Walk," ordered the leader simply. June was led through crystal corridors that sang softly as the Hyoran walked on them. He noticed that his own footsteps made no sound. The crystal did not recognize him as worthy of response. They entered a vast chamber with walls that rose so high that the ceiling was lost in shadows. The room was filled with Hyoran officials, standing in precise formations. At the center was a raised platform where a single figure sat. Princess Nari of the Hyorin royal family was smaller than the other Hyorin, but somehow seemed to fill more space. Her crystalline form was tinted with blue and purple, marking her royal bloodline. She wore no crown, but her position of authority was clear in how the others oriented themselves around her like planets around a sun. "The human trespasser," announced one of the guards, pushing June forward. Princess Nari studied him with eyes that reflected light like cut gems. There was no curiosity in her gaze, only cold assessment. "Human," she said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "You have entered the sacred space of the Hyorin Empire without permission. You have collected cultural data about species under our protection. These are serious crimes." "It was a navigation error," June explained, keeping his voice steady. "My charts showed the border in a different location. As for the cultural data, I'm a researcher. I study how different species communicate and share ideas. I mean no harm." The princess tilted her head slightly. "Ignorance is not an excuse under Hyorin law, and humans are particularly unwelcome in our space after what happened during the first contact." June knew about this. A misunderstanding decades ago had led to tension between humans and Hyorin. A human diplomat had touched a sacred crystal without permission, not knowing it was considered deeply offensive. "I understand your caution," June said. "But I am just one person seeking knowledge, not representing any government." "Your intentions are irrelevant," said Princess Nari. She stood, her crystal body catching the light and sending blue and purple reflections across the chamber. "Human June Kim, I find you guilty of trespassing in sacred space and attempted theft of protected cultural knowledge." The chamber went silent as everyone waited for her to announce the punishment. "The penalty," she continued, "is death." Murmurs rose from the assembled officials. Even among the strict Hyorin, immediate execution was rare without a full trial. "The human will be terminated at dawn," Princess Nari declared, her voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "Take him to the holding cells." As the guards led him away, June noticed something unusual about the princess, a small pendant hanging from her neck. Unlike the crystal adornments worn by other Hyorin, this appeared to be made of simple metal. Even more surprising, it looked like Earth craftsmanship, a small replica of Earth's moon. How did a Hyorin princess, especially one who clearly disliked humans, come to wear an Earth-made pendant? The question burned in June's mind as the guards led him to his cell to await execution. The holding cell was small but clean. Unlike the grand chambers of the Hyorin palace, this room was simple, with walls of unpolished crystal that gave off a soft glow. There was a single bed that adjusted to June's body shape when he sat on it, and a small washing area in the corner. June sat with his back against the wall, trying to process what had happened. In less than 12 hours, he would be executed for a navigation error. The unfairness of it burned in his chest, but he knew that anger would not help him now. He needed to think clearly if he wanted any chance to survive. The door to his cell slid open with a musical chime. A Hyorin entered, shorter than the guards who had brought June in, with crystal skin that had a slight green tint. He carried a tray with what appeared to be food and water. "Your final meal," said the Hyorin, placing the tray on a shelf that extended from the wall. "It has been adjusted to suit human biology." June looked at the food, a clear soup with floating vegetables and something that resembled bread. Under different circumstances, he might have been interested in studying this example of cross-species food preparation. "Thank you," he said. "May I know your name?" The Hyorin seemed surprised by the question. "I am Han," he said after a moment. "I work in the palace administration." "Han," repeated June. "I'm June Kim, though I guess you already know that." Han made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it sounded more like small bells ringing. "Yes, human June. You've caused quite a stir in the palace today. The princess rarely calls for immediate execution." This caught June's attention. "Is that unusual? I thought the Hyorin were known for strict justice." "Strict, yes," Han said, moving to leave. "But fair. Most outsiders get a full trial, with time to present their case. The princess seems to have a particular dislike for humans." "Wait," June called out. The question had been bothering him since the judgment chamber. The princess was wearing a pendant. It looked like it was made on Earth. Han paused at the door. He seemed to be considering whether to respond. Finally, he turned back. "You have good eyes, human June," he said quietly. "That pendant is indeed from Earth, though I don't think the princess knows it." June frowned, confused. How could she not know? Han glanced at the door, then stepped closer to June. "What I'm about to tell you is not secret exactly, but it's not spoken of often. Many years ago, when the princess was very young, there was an incident." Han explained that Princess Nari, when she was just a child, had been traveling on a small, higher-end transport ship. The ship had been damaged in an asteroid field and its communication systems were destroyed. By chance, a human research vessel had been in the same area and picked up the ship's distress beacon. The humans rescued the Hyoran ship, Han continued. They had no idea that one of the passengers was a royal child. The princess was traveling without announcement for safety reasons, with only her caretakers. "What happened?" June asked, fascinated despite his situation. "The human ship sheltered the Hyoran survivors for 3 weeks while repairs were made to their vessel. The princess was very young, only 5 cycles old. Too young to form permanent memories, but old enough to have experiences." "And the pendant?" June prompted. "A gift from one of the humans, I believe. When the princess returned home, the emperor ordered all records of the incident sealed. It was embarrassing that a royal child had been dependent on outsiders, especially humans who were still new to the galactic community. The princess herself doesn't remember the encounter." Han moved toward the door. "I've said too much. Eat your meal, human June. Find peace before dawn." After Han left, June could not eat. His mind was racing. The princess had been rescued by humans as a child, yet she seemed to hate them now. Somewhere in there was a connection he needed to make. June turned to the small datapad the Hyoran had allowed him to keep. It had been emptied of his research but still had basic functions. He began searching historical records about human Hyoran contacts. Most were formal diplomatic meetings, trade discussions, or border disputes. But he found a brief mention of a rescue operation from 25 years ago. The human ship had been the Explorer, a research vessel that had been mapping that sector of space. Among its crew were several scientists and their families, as research missions often lasted years. The ship's logs mentioned picking up survivors from a damaged Hyoran vessel, but there was no mention of a royal passenger. June dug deeper. The Explorer's crew manifest listed 2 cultural specialists, Dr. Min Lee and Dr. Sue Park, a married couple who had been studying how different species communicated through art and music. According to the logs, they had taken a special interest in the Hyoran survivors, particularly in helping the Hyoran child adjust to temporary life among humans. As the night grew later, June found a personal journal entry from Dr. Park that had been included in the official report. The Hyoran child responds well to music. Their crystalline biology seems to resonate with certain frequencies. Min and I have composed a simple lullaby that combines elements of traditional Earth melodies with tones that complement the child's natural resonance. We've named it Starlight Crossing. When we sing it, the child's crystal structure glows softly, and she seems calmer. There was more. Notes about how the child had worn the pendant, a small model of Earth's moon that Dr. Lee had given her. How she had seemed fascinated by human music and stories. How the other Hyoran adults had been distant and formal. But the child had formed what seemed like a genuine connection with the human researchers. June sat back on his bed thinking. The Hyoran were known to have physical responses to significant experiences. Their crystalline bodies stored emotional imprints that could last a lifetime, even if the conscious mind forgot the details. If Princess Nari had formed such an imprint, during her time with humans it might still be there, buried deep in her crystalline structure. And the pendant. She still wore it after all these years. Some part of her remembered, even if she didn't know what she was remembering. June searched until he found one last crucial piece of information, the musical notation for Starlight Crossing, the lullaby that the human researchers had created, specifically for the Hyoran child. He carefully memorized the melody and lyrics, running through them in his mind until he was certain he had them right. Dawn was approaching. June could see the first hints of light through the small window of his cell. He had found a connection, possibly the only thing that might save him from execution, but would it be enough? And would he have the chance to use it? The door chimed again. This time it was the guards, coming to take him to the execution chamber. "It is time," said the lead guard. June took a deep breath and stood. He had one chance, one desperate plan. As he followed the guards through the crystal corridors of the palace, he silently practiced the lullaby in his mind. His life would depend on a song. The guards led June through a series of crystal hallways that grew increasingly grand. The walls changed from simple, unpolished crystal to complex patterns that seemed to flow and shift as they walked past. June might have found it beautiful, if he weren't being led to his execution. They stopped before a pair of tall doors that glowed with a soft blue light. The lead guard placed her hand on the center of the doors, and they opened silently, revealing the execution chamber beyond. June took a deep breath and stepped inside. The chamber was a perfect octagon, with walls of the purest crystal he had ever seen. The floor was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the soft lights that hung from the high ceiling. In the center of the room was a small circular platform where June assumed he would stand for his execution. Around the edges of the room stood about 20 Heian officials in formal attire. Their crystal bodies caught the light and broke it into countless colors that danced across the walls. They stood perfectly still, watching June with emotionless eyes. At the far end of the chamber, on a raised platform, sat Princess Nari. Today, she wore a formal robe that seemed to be made of light itself, shifting from blue to purple as she moved. The earth pendant still hung around her neck, standing out against her crystalline form. "Bring the human forward," she commanded. The guards guided June to the center platform. When he stepped onto it, a soft hum filled the air, and a circle of light appeared around his feet. "Human June Kim," the princess announced formally, her voice echoing in the perfect acoustics of the chamber. "You stand condemned for violations against the Heian Empire. Your execution will proceed according to our ancient traditions." June noticed that every sound in the room seemed to be amplified and clarified by the crystal walls. The chamber was designed to focus and enhance sound, a fact that might work in his favor. "Before we begin," continued the princess, "you may speak your final words as is our custom. They will be recorded in the archives of the Heian Empire." This was the moment June had been waiting for. His heart raced, but he kept his voice steady as he spoke. "Princess Nari of the Heian Empire," he began, "I thank you for the opportunity to speak. According to your customs, I may choose the form of my final words. I choose not to speak, but to sing, a song that has traveled across the stars before." A murmur went through the assembled officials. The princess frowned slightly, the first real expression June had seen on her face. "This is unusual," she said, "but our laws do not specify that final words must be spoken. You may proceed with your song, human." June closed his eyes for a moment, recalling every detail of the lullaby from the records he had studied. Then he began to sing. The melody started soft and simple, a gentle rising and falling pattern that reminded him of waves on an ocean shore. The lyrics were in a combination of English and simple Heian words that the human researchers had learned during their time with the child: starlight crossing, paths entwining, crystal child of distant skies, safe in dreams while stars are shining, close your bright and watchful eyes. As June sang, he noticed that the acoustics of the room picked up his voice and carried it throughout the chamber, enhancing every note and word. The crystal walls themselves seemed to vibrate slightly with certain tones, creating harmonies that he hadn't expected. He continued to the second verse, which included specific tonal patterns that the researchers had noted were designed to resonate with Heian crystalline biology. Worlds apart but joined in slumber, different forms but dreams the same. Stars above too vast to number. Watch while I sing out your name. June kept his eyes on Princess Nari as he sang. At first, she showed no reaction, sitting perfectly still on her platform. But as he reached the middle of the song, he saw her hand move, almost unconsciously, to touch the pendant at her neck. The third verse was the most complex, incorporating subtle harmonic patterns that, according to the researchers' notes, had been specifically tuned to the unique crystalline frequency of the child they had rescued. Though the void seems vast and endless, though the night seems cold and long, know that you are not friendless. Hear our voices in this song. As this verse filled the chamber, something remarkable happened. Princess Nari's crystalline form began to glow with a soft inner light. It started at her core and spread outward, pulsing gently with the rhythm of the lullaby. This was the resonance, response that Hyorans experienced only with the most significant stimuli, a deep, physiological reaction that could not be faked or controlled. The officials along the walls shifted uncomfortably, exchanging confused glances. This was clearly not what they had expected from an execution ceremony. June moved to the final verse, his voice growing stronger as he saw the effect the song was having. When you wake to see the morning, when your journey takes you home, keep this song as gift and warning. No one need traverse alone. As the last notes faded away, the chamber fell into complete silence. Everyone was watching the princess, whose crystalline body continued to glow with internal light. Her hand was now gripping the pendant tightly, and her face showed confusion and shock. After what seemed like an eternity, she spoke, her voice unsteady. "Stop the execution," she commanded. The circle of light around June's feet faded away. The guards looked at each other, uncertain. "Princess?" one of them ventured. "I said stop," she repeated, her voice stronger now. She stood up from her seat, the glow still pulsing within her crystalline form. "Clear the chamber. Everyone except the human." The officials and guards hesitated, clearly surprised by this unexpected command. "Now," she said, her royal authority returning to her voice. One by one, the Hyoran officials filed out of the room. The guards followed reluctantly, casting suspicious glances at June as they left. When the last of them had gone, and the doors closed, Princess Nari descended from her platform and approached June. She stopped a few steps away from him, studying him with eyes that now showed a range of emotions: confusion, wonder, and something that might have been fear. "That song," she said quietly. "Where did you learn it?" June took a careful breath before answering. "From the historical records of a human research vessel called the Explorer. 25 years ago, that ship rescued a damaged Hyoran transport. Among the survivors was a young Hyoran child." The princess's hand went again to her pendant. "That is impossible. I have never been rescued by humans. I would remember such a thing." "You were very young," June explained gently. "According to the records, you were only 5 cycles old. Too young to form permanent memories, but not too young to form imprints," she finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not too young for my crystalline structure to resonate with significant experiences." She looked down at the pendant she held. "And this? Did it come from them too?" June nodded. "A gift from one of the human researchers, Dr. Min Lee. He gave it to you before you returned to your people." Princess Nari looked up at June, her crystalline eyes reflecting the light in the room. "Why would they help us? Why would they create a song for a Hyoran child?" "Because that's what humans do," June said simply. "We try to connect, to understand, to help when we can." The researchers on that ship were studying cultural exchange. They believed that different species could learn from each other, enrich each other. For a long moment, Princess Nari was silent. Then she turned away from June. "Return to your cell," she said. "I need to verify what you have told me. If you have lied, your execution will still take place." "I understand," June said, feeling hope rise within him for the first time since his capture. The guards returned to escort him back to his cell. As he left the chamber, he saw Princess Nari still standing in the center, holding her pendant. Lost. In thoughts of a past she could not remember but could somehow feel in the very structure of her being. 3 days passed with June waiting in his cell. The guards brought him regular meals now, not just a final one. Han visited once, his crystal eyes wide with surprise. "You are still alive," Han said, sounding impressed. "What happened in the execution chamber?" June explained about the song and the princess's reaction. Han listened with growing wonder. "The resonance response," Han murmured. "That is rare and cannot be faked. It happens only when a Hyoran encounters something that has made a deep imprint on their crystalline structure." He looked at June with new respect. "You have given the princess much to think about." On the 4th day, when June had almost given up hope of hearing anything more, the cell door opened. Instead of guards, it was a royal attendant. Her crystal, form tinted with the same blue as the princess. "Human June," she said formally. "The princess requests your presence in her private study." This was unexpected. June had thought he might be released or perhaps face a proper trial, but a private meeting with the princess herself was surprising. The attendant led him through parts of the palace he had not seen before. Unlike the grand public spaces, these halls were more personal, with art pieces and small gardens set into alcoves along the walls. They passed several guards who watched June with suspicion, but did not interfere. Finally, they reached a door made of a smoky gray crystal that swirled with inner light. The attendant placed her hand on it, and it opened silently. "Enter," she said, remaining outside as June stepped through. The princess's private study was unlike any room June had seen in the palace so far. One wall was entirely transparent, offering a breathtaking view of the crystal city below. Another wall held what appeared to be a library of crystal shards that glowed with stored information. The center of the room featured a large desk made from a single piece of crystal that seemed to float a few inches above the floor. Princess Nari stood by the transparent wall looking out at the city. She wore simpler robes today, though they still shifted between blue and purple as she moved. The earth pendant hung prominently around her neck. "Human June," she said without turning. "Do you know how Hyoran record our history?" The question caught him off guard. "I believe you store information in crystal matrices," he answered carefully. "Yes. Our most important records are kept in secret vaults, encoded in crystals that can only be read by those with the proper authority." Now she turned to face him. "For 3 days I have been reading such records. Records that were sealed by my father, the Emperor, 25 years ago." She gestured to a series of floating holographic images that hovered above her desk. June recognized them as records from the incident he had researched, the rescue of the Hyoran transport ship by the human vessel Explorer. "I found the truth," she said quietly. "When I was a child, I was indeed aboard that transport ship. It was damaged in an asteroid field and a human research vessel came to our aid." She walked to her desk and touched one of the holographic images. It expanded to show a recording of a human ship, an older model research vessel with Explorer written on its hull. "My caretakers died in the initial damage to our ship. I was alone, a royal child whose identity was hidden for my protection during travel. The humans had no idea who I was. They simply found a frightened Hyoran child and took care of me." She touched another image, which showed a human couple, a man and woman in research uniforms. They were smiling at the camera, arms around each other. "Dr. Min Lee and Dr. Sue Park," Princess Nari said, "cultural specialists who took a special interest in me. According to these records, they noticed something about my crystalline structure that was different from the other Hyoran survivors. They recognized your royal lineage," June said, remembering what he had read in the logs. The princess nodded. "They did, though they told no one, not even their own captain. They understood that such information could put me in danger if it became widely known. Instead, they protected me, created ways to communicate with me, and ensured my safety until I could be returned to my people." She touched her pendant. "This was a gift from Dr. Lee. The records include his explanation of why he gave it to me. He said that Earth's moon reflects the light of the sun, just as he hoped I would reflect the light of understanding between our peoples one day." June stayed silent, letting the princess process her discoveries. The most remarkable part, she continued, was what happened when I was returned to my father. He was grateful for my safety but embarrassed that a royal child had been dependent on outsiders. He declared that all records of the incident would be sealed, and that I was too young to remember anyway. She walked back to the window, looking out at the city below. But he was wrong about one thing. Hyoran children may not form conscious memories at that age, but our crystalline structures can hold imprints of significant experiences. The song you sang, Starlight Crossing, it was created specifically for me, wasn't it? Yes, June confirmed. The researchers designed it to match your unique crystalline frequency. They found that it calmed you when you were distressed. Princess Nari turned back to him, and June was surprised to see that her crystalline form was glowing faintly from within, the same resonance response he had witnessed in the execution chamber. For 25 years I have carried two things without understanding why, she said. This pendant, which I found among my childhood possessions and felt compelled to keep, and a dislike of humans that never made sense to me. A dislike of humans? June asked, confused. Yes, I was raised with the official view that humans were dangerous and unpredictable. But beneath that teaching, I carried a stronger feeling, not of fear or dislike, but of loss. I mistook it for hatred. Her voice softened. It was actually grief. Some part of me remembered the connection I had formed with those humans and missed them. She gestured to another holographic image, a video recording with no sound. It showed the human couple singing to a small Hyoran child, whose crystal form glowed with the same resonance June had seen in the princess. They knew, Princess Nari whispered. They knew who I was, and they never used that knowledge for leverage. They simply cared for me. She waved her hand, and all the holographic images disappeared. Then she faced June directly. Human June Kim, she said formally. I have made a decision. You will not be executed. Your trespass into our space was indeed unintentional, based on outdated charts. But more than that, you have helped me recover a truth that was hidden from me. A truth about the capacity for kindness across species. June felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Princess. Do not thank me yet, she said with what might have been a slight smile. I am not simply releasing you. I have a proposal. She returned to her desk and pressed her hand to its surface. New holographic image appeared, a formal document written in both Hyoran script and English. For too long the Hyoran Empire has isolated itself from the galactic community, especially from humans. My father believed this was necessary for our safety and cultural purity, but I now question that belief. She looked at June with a new intensity. I propose to appoint you as the first human cultural ambassador to the Hyoran Empire. Your background in anthropology makes you uniquely qualified, and your actions have demonstrated both intelligence and sensitivity to our ways. June stared at her in shock. This was far more than the simple release he had hoped for. This is a significant change in policy, he said carefully. Will the Emperor approve? My father respects tradition, but he also respects evidence. I will present him with the sealed records and my own resonance response as proof that humans and Hyarans can form meaningful connections. She touched her pendant again. And I believe he will listen. June found himself smiling. Then I accept. Princess Nari. It would be an honor to serve as cultural ambassador. For the first time, the princess smiled in return. A subtle expression, but unmistakable. Good. We have much work to do, Ambassador June, starting with updating those starry charts of yours. 6 months had passed since June had stood in the execution chamber and sung a lullaby to save his life. Now he walked through the grand crystal halls of the Hyoran Palace not as a prisoner, but as the official human cultural ambassador. Guards, who had once watched him with suspicion, now nodded respectfully as he passed. June had been given quarters in the diplomatic wing of the palace, a suite of rooms with views of both the Crystal City and the stars beyond. He had filled the space with items that represented human culture, books, artwork, musical instruments, and small plants from Earth. The higher-end visitors who came to meet with him were often fascinated by the plants, as their own biology was so different. Today was an important day. After months of careful work, Princess Nari was ready to announce a new cultural exchange initiative to the Hyoran people. It had not been easy to convince the Emperor and the Royal Council. Centuries of isolation were not quickly undone. But the princess had been persistent, presenting evidence from the sealed records and demonstrating her own resonance response to the human lullaby. June arrived at the great hall where the announcement would take place. It was already filled, with Hyoran officials, diplomats, and citizens who had been selected to attend this historic event. Among them, June spotted Han, who had been promoted to serve as his liaison with the palace administration. "Ambassador June," Han greeted him, using the title with a hint of amusement in his voice. "Quite a different reception from your first visit to this hall." "Much better than an execution," June agreed with a smile. "Is everything ready?" "Yes. The princess has prepared for this day very carefully. She has even been practicing something special, though she would not tell me what it is." Before June could ask more, a musical tone rang through the hall, signaling that the royal family was about to enter. Everyone stood still as the Emperor and Princess Nari entered from a side door. The Emperor was tall even for a Hyoran, his crystalline form tinted with deep blue that seemed almost black in certain lights. He moved with dignity to the central platform and stood watching the assembled crowd. Princess Nari joined him, wearing formal robes of state and the earth pendant prominently displayed around her neck. "People of the Hyoran Empire," the Emperor began, his voice deep and resonant. "For many centuries we have maintained our isolation from the wider galaxy, believing it necessary for our security and cultural preservation. Today, we begin a careful re-evaluation of that policy." He gestured to Princess Nari, who stepped forward. "As eyed into, my daughter has championed a new approach to our relationship with humans. I was skeptical at first, but she has presented compelling evidence that such a relationship can be beneficial to both our peoples. I have therefore approved a limited cultural exchange initiative to be overseen by Princess Nari and Human Ambassador June Kim." This announcement was met with murmurs from the crowd. Some sounded excited, others concerned. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. "I now invite Princess Nari to share her vision for this initiative." The princess stepped to the center of the platform. She looked more confident than June had ever seen her, her crystalline form glowing softly from within. "Honored guests," she began, "many of you know that I once called for the immediate execution of the human who now serves as ambassador to our people. What you do not know is why I changed my mind." She told the story of her rescue as a child, of the humans who had protected her without seeking advantage, of the song they had created just for her. As she spoke, June could see the crowd's reaction changing from skepticism to interest. For too long, we have viewed other species, particularly humans, as threats rather than potential friends. This view was based on fear and misunderstanding, not on evidence or experience. Today we begin to change that. She outlined the Cultural Exchange Initiative, a program that would allow Hyoran scholars to study human art, music, and literature, and human researchers to learn about Hyoran crystal technology and social structures. There would be carefully managed visits in both directions, shared research projects, and eventually perhaps regular diplomatic relations. "But before we move forward," she said, "I wish to honor the past, specifically the human kindness that was shown to me as a child." She turned to June with a small nod. This had not been part of the planned ceremony, and he was curious about what would happen next. Ambassador June Kim reminded me of a connection I had forgotten but that my crystalline structure remembered. Today, I wish to share that connection with all of you. To June's surprise, the princess began to sing. Her voice was clear and beautiful, filling the great hall with sound. She was singing Starlight Crossing, the very lullaby that June had sung to her in the execution chamber, but she had changed it. The melody was the same, but she had adapted the lyrics to speak of new beginnings and bridges between different worlds. As she sang, her crystalline form began to glow brightly, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls of the hall. The effect on the audience was remarkable. Many of the Hyoran began to resonate in response, their own crystalline forms glowing softly in harmony with the princess. Even the emperor showed a faint resonance, though he remained formal and composed. When the song ended, there was a moment of complete silence, and then the hall erupted in sound, a crystalline chiming that June had learned was the Hyoran equivalent of applause. The emperor stepped forward again, looking at his daughter with new respect. The resonance response cannot be commanded or controlled, he said to the crowd. It arises only from genuine connection. I have seen the evidence with my own eyes. Hyoran and human can form such connections. Let us move forward with caution but also with hope. After the ceremony, June found himself on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City, joined by Princess Nari. That was quite a performance, and he said, "You never mentioned you were planning to sing." "Some messages are better conveyed through music than words," she replied. "The human researchers who created that song understood that. I wanted my people to understand it too." She looked out at the city below, where lights were beginning to shine as dusk approached. "There will be challenges ahead," she said. "Many of my people are still uncertain about opening our borders to outsiders, and I imagine many humans will be wary of us as well." "Change takes time," June agreed. "But what happened today is a good beginning." The princess touched her pendant thoughtfully. "When Dr. Lee gave me this, he said he hoped I would reflect the light of understanding between our peoples. I didn't understand what that meant until now. And now? Now I see that we are not so different despite our biology. The human researchers who cared for me saw that. They created a song that could speak to the deepest part of me, not because I was Hyoran, but because I was a child who needed comfort." She turned to look at June. "That is what we must build on. Not our differences, but the things we share. The capacity for kindness, for creativity, for connection. These transcend species." As they stood watching the stars appear above the Crystal City, June thought about how close he had come to death in this place, and how a simple lullaby had changed everything. It seemed fitting that music, a universal language of sorts, had been the key to building this bridge between different worlds. "I've been thinking about what to focus on first in our cultural exchange," he said. "After today, I believe it should be music." "I agree," said the princess. Her crystalline form caught the starlight and broke it into countless colors. After all, that is where our story began. And as night fell over the Hyoran capital, human and princess stood side by side, different in almost every way yet connected. By understanding, a first step toward friendship between their peoples and a promise of many more steps to come.